Back to the Future Part 2 and 3. 2 action-packed adventures in one great game. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Joe.
The game wants you to believe, based on that back of the box, that this is like a deal you couldn't possibly pass up. But is this a good deal? Just before you even talk about the game itself, is this a good deal, or do you assume, because they have now condensed one video game into 2 movies, do you assume it's going to be half-assed instead? Or are you like, oh, this is going to be 2 totally different games?
Let's be honest. The amount of, cultural zeitgeist that 2 has, it's multiples of what 3, I think, at least in modern memory. So I think, if we're talking about how much of each movie is in this game, I think, it's the appropriate ratio.
I think I recall Joe being a 3 apologist.
I am a 3 apologist. I was just about to apologize, but I do think 2 is better than 3. But I think 3 is good, and I think that
3 is good.
It was a choice to be like, yeah, we're just going to stay in one time period that's not related to anything else that's happened in this series so far. And I get why people are upset with that because you want more of it. But if you go into it and you're okay with that, it's a good movie.
I was looking for more of the Oedipal stuff.
Yeah, well, I'll say that I'll take 2 and 3 over 1, regardless of that stuff. 1 is just that's the classic. It's
That is crazy. 1 is so much better than 2 and 3. 1 is
but it's the classic. You've seen 1 so many times. When it comes out, I'm like, yeah, I've seen this already. I want to see what happens
that
next.
I understand. But
It's also again, from my kid brain. If I'm looking at them all, which is a better, more solid, just film, I'm sure it's 1. But from my kid brain, I'm like, I want to see time travel stuff, interesting things from time travel.
Yeah, seeing Jaws 3D,
you don't really get
pretty freaking
so
cool.
much of that. Yeah, right. And you see the future. You see an accurate representation of 2015.
Yeah.
It had the Cubs winning the World Series, but I think a year later or something.
Yeah, that's why I can't take the movie seriously.
Right. They came close. And there's a lot of funny things that came true as a result of Back to the Future Part 2, like those Nike self-tying shoes. Eventually Nike did release those, but only 100 of them, and they made people cry, kind of like the Szechuan sauce from Rick and Morty, and Rick and Morty is basically just a ripoff of Back to the Future.
That's
so it's
true.
all full circle. But just to get back to the original question here, we played Back to the Future Part 1, and that was worthy of being its own game. Worthy in the sense that they managed to fill out...
It had all the classic scenes. Yeah. It was really a great tie-in.
Well, they filled out a full game.
To answer your initial question, when you read that back of the box, it immediately makes me think this is a Mario Duck Hunt situation. There's 2 games in this. They gave me both of these good games in this. It's no. They've taken one move... All right, I'll spoil it right here. I didn't beat this game, but just looking through all the footage, I'm like, wait, when does Back to the Future Part 2 end and Part 3 really begin here? It all kind of blends together. It's not 2 separate games for the price of 1.
It's also not either of these movies, but we'll get into that.
No, yeah, it's actually I thought Joe was going to go in that direction. Joe, it is Mario.
It is Mario.
I don't know what is happening, but before we talk about the game, I would like to read you what I would consider the core gameplay of Back to the Future Part 2 and 3.
Is this from the instruction manual?
It's a mix of the instruction manual and a little bit of paraphrasing here and there. So I'm just going to lay it all out to try and present to you the game as a whole, and then I would, and then we'll talk about it. Does that sound fair?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. It's a side-scrolling platformer and item collection game in which you travel through various times or years, 1955, 1985, 2015, and eventually all the way back to 1885. And throughout this, you are platforming and stomping on enemies like you would Goombas or Koopas. And along the way, you find areas that become puzzle-solving mechanics where you have to, like collect a certain amount of a certain thing for the object to appear, or do something within a time limit. And these little quick mini-game-like stages reward you with a prize that you must then bring that prize item to the correct location in order to
time
fix
and
the
location.
events. What's that?
Time and location.
Yeah, time and location, right, to fix the events in the timelines. So there are multiple items to find across the various different stages, and then there's also different places to put them. All this to say, while that is the core game, this is a game where right away I just felt lost.
Oh, absolutely. So,
yeah.
Shall we?
Yes, because I would like to know, for me, I would say I gave up on the idea of this game being any good the second that I jumped. But, but realistically, the most challenging part of this game is finding anything to do.
So, I very quickly realized that the game was a lot bigger than I was expecting. Or not even just bigger. Like, it was a lot more complex than I was expecting. Like, there's no, levels here. That really. This is, one giant maze. And basically the plot reason why you're going to all these places and grabbing these things and bringing them back to the time and place is Biff hit everything, and he's going to break the space-time continuum if you don't fix it. And I don't think that that's what happened in the movie, but fine. But basically, they drop you off in 1985 in some 1985 hellscape with Biff being a multi-billionaire entertainment mogul, whatever, and you have to just sort of navigate all of these very samey levels. They are kind of levels in that they're screens, at least. That some of them have landmarks, most of them don't. You just kind of have to remember how the platforms are arranged. And you have to go around and find these hidden rooms and find these hidden key items, but you are given no guidance at all. And you are kind of expected to create a really complex map. And when I figured out what was happening, games like this, I usually can't even get a very basic wraparound until I do some secondary research. And I found a video of this guy explaining how he made a map, and it's this 4D chess looking thing going back and forth between streets, and it's really wildly complex for what I was expecting out of a movie tie-in game.
Yeah, I think you could even maybe say it's overly complex because it's way more vast than it needs to be for what is included in all of the vastness, if that makes any sense. You have all these time periods, and that's a cool idea on the at base value. But you have all these time periods, but each time period is a pretty long, I'd say full side scroller level, and maybe then some length level. But then each of those has elevators that go up and down to other just almost identical looking full side scroller levels. And I mean, I don't even know. I feel like there's 10 layers of these.
There's 16. There's
16 layers.
So here's the thing. Basically, those in each of these screens, you'll have any number between 1 and 4, I think, gateways that kind of bring you to a different street. You're technically all in the same neighborhood in this town, but they're all the cross streets, and you're kind of going north and south on these streets. And there are 16 streets, and there are 3 versions of each, and the way that you get between them is different depending on the time period you're in. So they're kind of like mazes that have sections that are kind of cut off. So you have to. It's kind of a cool concept, and I remember Titanfall did something like this in the first-person shooter space, but we won't get into that. But it's the way that they've designed this. It's turned into backtracking the game. Which is okay if it's like a really small space that has a lot of bespoke, highly detailed, fun elements, but not so fun if it is a very bland platforming level.
Right. And it's like there are things to be found in it, but it's spread out. It's spread out over too much space. So like all this space is like most of the time when you walk from one point to another, it was a waste of time. Like unless you just know exactly where to go.
Right. And that's the issue, right? Is that the stages themselves, right? So if you're in the alternate 1985 and you're walking around, you are doing this Super Mario Brothers style platforming a little bit. It doesn't feel anything like Super Mario Brothers other than the fact that you stomp on enemies and have a fireball power up. We could talk about why they decided to do that later, but like you're mostly just wandering around that hoping that you find the mini game portion of this that is like a smaller a larger smaller Marty in a big area where you have to collect items of like 50 pizza slices or something, and then as a result you're rewarded with the piece of treasure. But that's all this game. That would have been the moment where like, oh, now you're doing something specific from the movie. Like now you're doing a hoverboard chase, or now you're help me out. Another thing that happened, another action sequence in Back to the
now
Future.
You're jumping off a roof and landing on a DeLorean.
There you go. Yeah, it's like those kinds of things could have happened, but instead it just becomes this weird like a different version of platforming and collecting that's very small and bite-sized. And then once you get that item, now it's like, okay, now go back out to the main world and just continue to roam around aimlessly, hoping that you either find another one of those mini games or find a place to put this damn item that you just picked up.
It better be the right place, because if you try to put it in the wrong one, you will lose it and have to go back and do the mini game again.
Right, and do that at minimum then, like what? There's like 30 of these items?
Times.
Yeah, so minimum 30 times. It's just...
Yeah, I'll say just watching the, always after I finish one of these games, I watch like the YouTube like long play of it. And usually it's like between 20 minutes to like an hour and a half. This is to beat this game, which I'm assuming someone who's very well versed, it's not necessarily a speed run, but someone who knows exactly where to go. 2 hours and 58 minutes. It took 3 hours for like the expert to do it.
Okay, but like the one thing I want to catch, I think like we get into this and we sort of come at this criticizing it from the point of view of 3 guys that have to play these games in a week. And it's like,
true.
Why the fuck do they take this long? Like, how can I be expected to do all this? And like, I'm very guilty of this. But I'm not even saying that like no game should be this elaborate, no game should be this long. That's not what we're saying here. It seems to be this complex and this long with no context, like without any reason for that, being, and without any real thematic, without any kind of thematic relation to the movie.
right. And just to agree real quick with you, Sean, like it's not like, if I see this length of time on this quote unquote speed run or expert run for Metal Gear or Willow or something, like regardless of how I feel about those games, like that makes sense, that fits, and it could make sense for this, but it's like 3 hours of doing this, like it's just like, wow, that's a lot of this.
Yeah.
Right. That is the biggest problem. And, sorry to sound so negative about the game. We try to hide these a little bit, but like It is incredibly dull what is happening in this game at all times, and I think that's because it called itself Back to the Future Part 2 and 3. And I barely feel like that character is Marty McFly in any way. Like,
well, here's the thing.
There's nothing happening.
They got the DeLorean. Like the DeLorean,
sure, but you don't get to even fly the DeLorean. Like it picks you up when you die, and you can use it to travel to the other things.
But you get to interact with that cool, control panel.
I also like how the DeLorean will sometimes just drop you off directly into like your death.
Yeah,
like it'll just like depending on where you die, it's like we're just gonna drop you off exactly over this pit.
But there's like one or two instances of the movie, other than forcing cutscenes that explain Biff taking the almanac and everything. Like, there's only like one or two moments in this entire game that feel like they are tied in any way to Back to the Future, and that is the Back to the Future logo in the bottom left that's just always there. Yeah. It's just always on screen. Oh, I forgot I was playing Back to the Future because it's nothing like it. Thank you for reminding me what I'm playing. And then the other instance is that, and there was probably just one employee in this whole thing that cared about this game and said, guys, don't forget we're making a Back to the Future movie, video game. We might as well talk about the consequences of time travel and everything. And that is that when you do travel between 1955, 1985, and 2015, no, that is something else. But no, this is that every time you do one of those time travels, it creates a clone of Marty in the year in which you were. So if you go back to that year, you might run into that clone, touch it, and die. Just like how in the movie, they're not allowed to see one another because it causes you to instantly faint.
Oh, yeah.
That's a thing.
Yeah. That's, that is a good level of detail. It's not what I thought you were going to bring up. I'd forgotten about that. But I thought you were going to bring up the hoverboard, which is...
it's not a hoverboard.
Such a half-assed...
It's just a moving platform.
It's a floating platform, yeah.
It's a moving platform that disappears after a second anyways. It's just we put it in. It doesn't really help you in any way.
There's also all of the background elements, at least in 85, that's just evil Biff, lights everywhere.
Yeah, but then shouldn't it, I don't know, shouldn't the mini games also just be related to whatever, area you just... So, say you were near Biff's casino. Can't the minigame be a casino minigame at least, even though there was no famous casino scene?
Yeah. I'll say about the minigames, I don't know, they're not themed at least on the movie or at the very least, just on, the environment that is sort of related to the movie, like the casino or whatever. But I do think that the minigames have mostly interesting concepts. Again, not related to what we want, but I like the idea. There's where every time you pick something up, the environment will either appear or disappear, turn invisible. So you have to remember where were the platforms. That's kind of cool. You pick something up, you can see it again for a second. Pick something else up, now it's all invisible again. You got to remember where to jump to next. That's a neat thing. There's a bunch of there's one where it's a bunch of Marty clones copy your every move.
Yeah.
And theoretically, the idea there is that, if they're all following you and they're all, delayed by one moment, you got to be careful of, what they hit. It was actually not executed properly because there's no moving things on the screen, so it doesn't matter.
You have to, dodge yourself at one point, but...
Yeah. But I did want to point out that if the main side-scrolling section are a ripoff of Super Mario Brothers, I do think that the mini-game sections are at least somewhat a ripoff of Mario Bros, the arcade game.
Oh, hell, absolutely. In fact, I think there's even one that's very obviously a Donkey Kong, the first stage level just recreated, inside this game. I think there's a lot of those examples in these mini-games. And the mini-games, I agree, Joe. I think that there are some, and I keep calling them mini-games, but they're really just collect all the items or get to the end. I do agree that there's some good ideas in these. In fact, I think that one that you guys were just talking about with the multiple Martys and you can't touch any of them, that's something that eventually Super Mario Brothers does steal. That becomes a thing in later Mario games where there's a Shadow Mario that follow. I know in Super Mario Wonder, the most recent iteration of 2D Mario games, that's a big thing. So it is posing some interesting ideas. The only problem is there's such short bursts between long stretches of trying to find them that ultimately you're just left wondering, like, what's the point?
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
I guess the individual puzzle rooms, I guess we can call them. I don't. They're fine. There's some fun design in those, but yes, I think like 80 to 90% of the time you're playing this game, you're going to spend lost in the quote unquote overworld, which plays more like a Eurojank version of Super Mario with a weird jump and spinies that you can jump on for some reason that kind of broke my brain. You remember the spinies?
Yep. They have the spikes out, so you would assume you can't.
You would assume you
touch
can't jump, but you can jump on them, and you should.
Yeah, also, I wouldn't say they look like spinies. They are spinies.
Yeah, they're just spinies in the same way that
exactly
like there's like that fish from Mario that's just also there.
There's also just
Right.
warp pipes. He just goes
Right.
down warp pipes.
Yeah. So I think like even though there's still some stuff good about those puzzle rooms, you're not going to be in those very often, and they're simple enough that you're probably going to solve them very quickly without having to retry, and you're just going to spend more time in this overworld.
Here's one who deserved a raise for the making of this game. The guy who had to title all of these puzzle rooms. Title, like okay, this room needs a title. Like, it couldn't just be like you just go into the puzzle room. It had to be like, and this one's called Cloning Owned, and this one is Teddy Bears on
like
Parade.
clowning.
Yeah, it was always like a reference to something. School's out,
but not
this is your
Back to the
life.
Future. Not a reference
No.
to Back to the Future.
Not
No,
a
no,
reference
no.
at all. And I can't figure out the need to title those for any other reason than like strategy guide purposes. Like,
I was just gonna say, like they're the foresight. Like now in 2024, I'm like, hey, great, they're all titled. If I want to look one up, I just Google it, and like it comes right up because everybody's talking about these levels. But you can, yeah, like maybe he had the foresight, or
so
she.
is there any rhyme or reason to where the items go?
No, I don't think so.
That's got to be the worst part, right? Offensive of it all is that you get an
maybe
item.
they are items that are like because I wasn't paying attention, but maybe they are like older items, the one that you have to like retrieve and then put back in 1955, or like
Well, like I
newfangled
assume like
things.
you get like a malted milkshake at one point. I'm guessing it's a malted milkshake. I just
Yeah,
just a
that's
milkshake.
got to go to
It's
55,
malted for
right?
sure. Right. But I don't know. I never got it to the right place.
Well, we were talking about how it's Super Mario Brothers stole from Back to the Future here. Chrono Trigger also stealing from Back to the Future, as Joe referenced, or maybe Sean referenced it.
Yeah, that was me.
You plant the seed.
I knew about the tree.
You plant the seed in 55, and then if you go to the same location in 85, now there's a full-grown tree there.
You got
However,
to go to
that could
2015.
be-
It's only half grown in 85.
Okay.
That could be read as an actual reference to Back to the Future, because but it's the first Back to the Future. It's not part 2 or 3, so they still didn't get the movies they were talking about. But in the first Back to the Future, when Marty lands in 1955, he runs over a bunch of trees, or
They're not
runs
there
over
anymore.
a tree and ruins it. And then in the present, originally what was called Twin Pines Mall is called Twin Pine Mall.
I totally forgot about that.
And I think we did in the regular Back to the Future episode too.
It's one of the best attention to detail things. It's like constantly brought up in
Yeah, even though that kind of time travel doesn't make any sense. But continue.
Yeah, I think we also talked about that in Back to the Future
Yeah.
Part 1, so we need to make sure we don't repeat history here.
I mean, I want to talk about it. I got to address what Sean said before we move on.
No,
I
we
think
don't
the
need
time-
to.
That kind of time travel could make sense as long as it's consistent with the rest of those world's rules. But in Back to the Future, it's
true.
which is why it doesn't make sense.
Yes, yeah. Good. I'm glad you got that out of your system, and that
Yeah,
this
I had
doesn't.
to.
Well, yeah, as you know, we had to get it out of the way in Final Fantasy episode as well. That like Garland's time travel, does make sense within the rules of Final Fantasy. So Back to the Future's rules could make sense within the rules.
Did we
of,
come to that conclusion that it did make sense?
We did, yeah. It was pretty amazing. It took us 25
I think
minutes.
we came to it like live.
Yeah.
I think we all thought it didn't make sense, and as we talked about it, we were all like, oh.
I feel like I was still pretty. I don't know. I can't remember what I think about anything.
Go back and listen to it. In fact, everybody, go back and listen to 3 hours of a Final Fantasy episode.
Can you just insert the entire Final Fantasy episode here, like a soundbite?
The entire episode. Sure. Okay, what I was going to bring up was, we were trashing the game almost entirely. And not that I have anything necessarily positive to say, but I do think that one thing that makes this game unique compared to other NES platformers is that, you don't have stages, right? In the first Back to the Future game, it was just level clear, like the objectives were different in the levels, and then once it was over, you just moved to the next stage. Here, you are just trying to find the mini, it's a little bit non-linear, but nothing matters. It's not Metroidvania in any way. It's not like, oh, because you did this sequence instead, history is altered. There's very little consequence as a result. So it's just like, oh, I could see how a game could make this approach interesting, but ultimately what they chose is just to make a very empty wasteland.
Yeah, it's kind of like what I've said many times of just like, I just want more systems-based games. And it's kind of like, this kind of is one where you're not going from level to level. Yes, there are different screens that kind of act like levels, but you're going to be revisiting these. There's it's not a linear going from one to the other, and you have an overarching goal that you are accomplishing slowly via things that you will figure out over time. But sometimes I'm just like, oh, maybe I don't want those things if this is how it ends up being. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. Again, it was like they had to, because they chose to try and make it like, oh, there's this, we're going to base this on the time travel element of Back to the Future, which sounds like a no-brainer because that's what Back to the Future is. That's it's these. Yeah, you do expect it to work in some sort of Chrono Trigger-ish way, which I think is, maybe a lot to ask from an NES game. So when I'm boot up this game, I'm expecting and would be just happy with just a platformer that takes me to familiar Back to the Future tropes in it. I'm not expecting it to be actually based, your actions matter and everything in the present and the future. It'd be great if they could pull it off, but it's like they tried, that was their idea, but they didn't do anything to make that happen. So it's you might as well have just given me the basic game.
I think we weren't very the original, but if I had to between this 12-hour extreme puzzle of where to put time displaced items and a mini game about trying to avoid tongue kissing your mother, which did exist in the first game. I think I would
technically exist in the movie.
And yeah, but a super gamified version. I think I choose the mini game about trying to avoid tongue kissing your mother.
Yeah, it's funny because it's gonna seem like there's no pleasing us because
there really isn't though.
Yeah, that's true. What we did complain about in the first one was well, this isn't about time travel, and now this one's about time travel, but they did it wrong. That's the problem.
Yeah, and thank goodness Marty didn't need to actually fix all these things in the movie. Could you imagine that movie where he has to find the correct positions? Man, that's boring. Thank goodness it was just grab the almanac. But this is the section now where I do want to talk a little bit about part 2 and 3 of the movies, because I feel like there's still a nice way to complement that with the game. And as I was watching Back to the Future Part 2, which is a classic, so many great scenes, so many memorable moments, I love that movie, but I couldn't help but feel like a lot of Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3. It's not about suspension of disbelief from the audience, but it does they write themselves into situations that are easily solved by just doing this one other thing, but they feel like they must do it this way. And with Back to the Future Part 2 specifically, why is Marty acting like he has to get the almanac as if he's a spy? Like, he should be doing, like, if all it is just grab the almanac and run, like, just ask Doc for a gun, point it at Biff, take the almanac,
so
and get
the
hell
movie
out
can
of there.
happen, Mike.
No, I know, but I'm talking about, like,
No.
I get that. No, I get that. So that's why the gun thing doesn't work, because that's also out of character for Marty, right? Because in Back to the Future Part 3,
Right.
he won't even do the duel with, Mad Dog Biff or whatever, Mad Dog Griff. So I get that. But then, like, okay, now the principal had the almanac at one point in the movie, and he's still acting like he needs to, like, go on his hands and knees and, like, when he's not looking, like, snatch it away. But, oh, the principal always looks at the last second. It's like, what's going to happen? Marty's not even a student at the school. What's going to happen if he sees
but
him
what's going to
grab the
happen
almanac?
is this guy is going to see you in there, and then you're going to either get thrown out or arrested or whatever, and then you're not going to be able to get the almanac. Also, Marty is not a student at the school, but he kind of is, because in the previous movie, that exact person was attending school there. The principal knew who he was. So, like, you know, I don't know. Yeah, you could just punch him in the face and run, I guess.
Yeah, I just feel like if you know, I could understand if I had to, like, finish up some other things there, but if that's, like, if I just need to dodge the cop for 3 hours, I think, like, most people could do that.
But, you know, if you put me, all right, if it's Principal Strickland, Marty McFly, I think based on Back to the Future Part 2, like, you see that Strickland is not, like, a pushover. I mean, he's got, like, a machine gun in the Biff future, and that's when he's 30 years older than he is there.
Right.
And he's like taking on thugs and stuff. Like, I don't know, I think that guy might have seen some shit, and maybe he'll just beat the shit out of Marty. As far as the gun thing, I mean, this is, you know, maybe me doing some gymnastics to make it work, but it's I mean, yeah, Marty doesn't exist in 1955, so it's like, what are the consequences? But the consequences are the same as now. The same reason that, like, when I need to solve something, like, the idea of me threatening someone with a gun is scary, because if I get caught, I go to jail. Marty will go to jail in a different time he doesn't even exist in, and then definitely everything's screwed up.
So
they can
you
just
go,
leave.
you go. This is what I would have done.
But
You go back to time and date that the almanac was published prior to the printing press.
yes.
You don't have to
I
go
like that.
fight any principals. You just, all you need is a high vis jacket and clipboard and a lighter and some lighter fluid. That's all you need.
But I do think one good, like, ace in the hole that they have in the storytelling of this is that Doc is very adamant that, like, we can't change anything. And I know that's kind of a joke because they changed so much. But, like, yeah, going back and destroying the almanac in the past might have consequences even worse than what you know, because, like, the butterfly effect, they're trying to undo the butterfly effect by putting everything back
I
the
can't
way
believe
that
they
it
ripped
was.
that off of the movie, The Butterfly Effect.
Yeah, the great Ashton Kutcher movie, The Butterfly Effect.
And then with Back to the Future Part 3, which I swear does exist in this game as well, but it is just doing the same thing.
None of us
as
got
Back
there.
With
to
a
the
cowboy
Future
hat
Part
on.
2, but with a
It
cowboy. Yeah,
takes so
the cowboy
long.
hat's a nice touch. It is a nice touch that they give
Yeah,
you a
yeah.
different look. But no, it is basically doing the same things again. So there's nothing new to cover. But the biggest surprise of this whole game is that there's never like a Biff boss fight. Like, it's just the mini games. It's just the puzzle of putting the item where it needs to be. There's never like a moment for the hoverboard. There's never a moment for the train. Like, it is what it is, and that this game isn't hiding anything. So instead, Back to the Future Part 3, when I watched it as a kid, I didn't watch it like immediately after Part 2. So watching it again now, 2 and 3 right back to back, I never realized like how obvious it was, because they were filmed back to back and it was all planned to begin with. They shot both movies at the same time. There's so many references to like, the third one's gonna be a Western and they're gonna go to 1885 in 2, that it's like, why are we doing this again? Like, I understand, Joe, that it's like, it's not a bad movie. I agree. I did like 3, and I think my biggest problem is like, but why is the whole thing in the Wild West? Like,
I mean, why is the whole first one in 1955?
No, I know, but that's cool.
That's the
That's
setting of the movie.
I know, yeah.
Oh, why is that cool? And the Wild West isn't cool?
Nobody existed in the Wild West. You know what I'm saying? Like, there was no reason to go back and fix that. Like, Doc just went there because he likes the Wild West, and now we have to deal with that. Like, it was an episode of Back to the Future. It wasn't like.
But do you want to rehash the first movie? Like the first movie is like, we have to fix this. We have to fix you screwed up by coming here. The second movie is like, okay, now we're in the future, but now the bad guy has the thing and we've got to stop. We got to undo the thing he did. The third movie is we're stranded and we got to find a way back without like screwing anything up. It's like there's three different plots.
I am on Joe's side.
It's not just
here.
like.
No, I just think the third one feels more like an episode of the week for Back to the Future rather than as big and stakesy and related to Marty as parts 1 and 2 were.
Well, it's related to Marty in the sense that it's Marty that's stranded and needs to get home. He's got to get literally back to the future. No, I know,
but it was more about his family in 1 and 2, you know? And
yeah, but that's fine. Like, it's not about his family in this one.
Yeah, but I guess that's what I'm saying. It just felt like it was just another adventure. It was literally a Rick and Morty thing for Marty and Doc instead. It was just like, it didn't feel like it was as additive as the first two were for like what the series was going for. Instead, it like, hey, Doc felt like going back to the West, so we're going to hang out for the West for the next 90 minutes.
I mean, I know what you're saying about the episode thing because I've felt that way about other moments and other like properties. Like I think I felt that way originally.
The third movie in most trilogies.
Yeah, but like, it didn't bother me in this one because it's like it doesn't feel like this was not an important part of the story. It was like this kind of gives Doc his arc and it gives Doc his happy ending and. I get that, like, it's weird and it's different than the other movies. Now, looking back on it, having not seen them in a while, I think that as much as growing up, 2 was my favorite, I think that 2 is the most different. because 2 is not about getting back to the future. Like, it's the only one where that's not the priority.
Right. 2 has the fun of, like, the events of the first movie are also happening at the same time.
I love that. Yeah.
So there's something interesting about that. Just because Sean brought it up about, like, trilogies and stuff, I was thinking in a weird way, just a parallel to this, is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles live action trilogy and how the third one, they, like, went to feudal Japan for the third movie. Like, the first one is this fun thing in Manhattan. The second one, all right, it's not. They don't really touch the turtles.
We all know that the first and second one are just steeped in really deep themes and symbolism and reasons to exist.
Maybe the first one. The second one, not so much. The second one, is a bit of a mess. But the third one is just like, okay, yeah, the Ninja Turtles are there, but like, why are we in the past now? Like, it's just. It feels like it's funny because I think it also came out like a couple of years, only a few years after Back to the Future Part 3. So there's maybe like a weird way that they're connected, but coincidence or not.
Yeah, I haven't. I wasn't really a big live action TMNT guy, so I don't really remember those movies that much. But I think that's a good analogy because I think I do sympathize more with what you're saying about the third one now that you mention it that way. But I guess the other reason that it doesn't bother me that it's so different is because it's a time travel franchise. So like, this is why they're in this other time. And like, I gotta love doesn't necessarily defend it, but I gotta love the end of Back to the Future 2 when Doc gets struck by lightning and then the guy comes out of the van. He's like, we've had this letter for 90 years.
Oh,
or
yeah,
whatever.
with Western Union. Like, yeah, that was good.
Yeah, so good. So like, it felt right because it like the movie before it led to it, and like you said, there were all these hints that like that was a part of it. And I think there's even in the second movie. This is a little thing that doesn't explain what you're asking, but there is, if I remember correctly, a moment where Doc puts into the DeLorean the date of like 1885 as like to prove a point to Marty. He's like saying like, what do you think, we want to do this or that? I don't remember exactly what it is, but he puts it in there, but like not ever intending to go there. And that's where the DeLorean is left set when he gets struck by lightning, which is why he ends up in 1885.
I just watched the movie the other day. I'm pretty sure I can goof that.
Okay. like that's cool. That's cool on a rewatch.
Yeah, I agreed. That's what I'm saying. It's like, I didn't know, actually. It's funny because in Back to the Future Part 2's ending, this became a film podcast. This is how much we hate the game. But in Back to the Future Part 2, like after everything, after the credit, like trailer for the third movie, like showing,
I never knew this.
It's just showing the footage that they must have captured already. That like, like, oh, this is what, like, you won't believe the adventure that they'll have in Part 3 and everything. There's no VO or anything, but it shows so much of the movie that it even shows Marty getting back together with his girlfriend that he left on that porch in the trailer. And it's like, wait a minute,
this is the end of the movie.
Yeah, that's the end of the movie. It's like, there's just no way that they would have thought that, they're going to go leave the West and then come back. Like,
this is just Back to the Future being very prescient about the future, about how most trailers will give away too much of the plot of the movie.
I just think it's funny that it shows all that
in
footage.
The future.
Yeah, it shows all that footage, and then it just says, like, Back to the Future Part 3 coming in 1990, and if you watch the movie on Peacock, where it's currently streaming, you will still see that. No, you'll just still see that.
Coming in 1990.
Yeah, coming in 1990. It's like, this can't be chopped from the movie? I would like to get back to the game for a minute.
Oh.
Okay. I was certain you were going to say, but what can't be chopped from this podcast is...
Oh, if only I was that smart, Joe. No, I want to talk about the game again because I mentioned very briefly that I knew that this game wasn't for me the second I jumped. And that's the first thing you do in this game. And I just want to make it clear that, like, it's not the worst jump I've ever seen, but it is something that you have to calibrate for every single time you do it.
It's very momentum based.
Yeah, you eventually learn it, but there's a bit of a stutter to it too, though.
You will end up jumping backwards if you try and that really messes with your projectile weapons, and it'll lead to a lot of accidental collisions that way. So yeah, it's not great, but I think once you get used to it, you learn the little weirdnesses of it. It's all good.
Yeah, one more weirdness of it though is the platforming overall is that you jump normally from these like girder thing to another girder thing, and these girder things are sitting on bricks. So like when there's a pit that you can fall in, there's still bricks there. So like it looks like floor. Like you have to like train your brain, at least in the Biff version, the Biff world.
That is true. That is a thing that exists.
Where it's like, yeah, you're standing on this platform, and then there's like these bricks in front of you, but bricks are just empty space. Like, just get that through your head. Like, as soon as you jump onto these bricks, you fall to your death. Like,
them is background bricks.
But they're not, because, like, yes, they are. Like, that's their intent. But they're not, because the thing you're walking on is sitting on those bricks. So it's like, well, if it was sitting on it, it's got to be up here in the foreground. Ugh, don't get me started.
Don't get me started.
Well, I was so disappointed, Back to the Future Part 2 and 3, that I checked out a couple of other Back to the Future games that I would like to talk about right now.
Did you play the Telltale one?
I didn't, because I actually hear that one's pretty damn good, so I want to rush through it just to talk about it.
I want to play that game.
That's an episodic adventure game where there's like multiple episodes and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I won't like it, because apparently I don't like episodic Back to the Future, but I do like that movie.
Well, it's also supposedly like canonically
it's
the fourth installment.
Yep, it is. I don't know how that works, like if Zemeckis was involved or just said like, yeah, sure, like I'll bless it, but but yeah, it does serve, at least it picks up the pieces from the end of Part 3, and that makes you wonder, to your point, Joe, like Doc, that was more of his story and his journey in the third one. Like, shouldn't we just be glad to see him like be done and to have a family and, live a happy life, and now we have to bring him back in just for some more shenanigans? I don't know. That's what I kind of hate about like Toy Story 4 and now 5. It's like, weren't they done? Didn't they do enough?
Nothing should
Didn't
end.
they do enough?
It'll never be enough.
Nothing should ever end.
Well, since we're talking about Back to the Future 4, I think it's worth mentioning Back to 4 on NES.
Dear God, no.
No, we will not play it because it is a bootleg game from China.
Oh.
that just has a Back to the Future 4 logo on the start screen, and then it's Blaster Master.
Oh.
The rest of the game.
That sounds better than this.
It is. You get Blaster Master.
Huh.
That's awesome.
That is
I don't know
pretty cool.
why they called it Back to the Future 4. Never any, like, I thought there was going to be a cool moment where you get some cutscenes where you can, like, find out, you know, like, the story, but it's just Blaster Master with a Back to the Future 4 on the starts. Then there's Back to the Future 2, not 2 and 3, just number 2 on Genesis, which starts off with a hoverboard level that feels like one of those Paperboy style games, you know, don't not try to like
So like most
weave
of
in
Back
and
to the
out.
Future.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that skateboarding level in the first NES game, but now with a hoverboard, and you know you can punch out Biff's goons and everything like that. But I only played that first level. It was hard. I didn't really get past it, so I just wanted to rush through these. So then I was like, oh well, what's Back to the Future 3 on Genesis like then? And that starts with you as Doc riding a horse and dodging every fucking thing in the Wild West all at once. It's like you're out in the desert, right? And it's not a desert, but like you're out there with no landmarks. You're not in a village or anything. You're just out there in the West.
Do trains drop out of the sky?
No, it's like birds and barrels and other things, and it's like so you have to constantly be jumping over things, ducking, and shooting at things, and it's like what is Doc doing here? Like it was just a very, very hard first level of the third game, and apparently for both these games, it's not just like, oh, this is a hoverboarding game and this is a horse riding game. Like every level is a different thing from the previous thing. So once you get good at the hoverboard section, forget about it because it doesn't matter anymore. Now you have to do this, you know, this next thing, which is, you know, one of them was like, I think it was Back to the Future Part 2 for Amiga. One of the levels was just like one of those sliding puzzle games, you know, where like you have
Like
to keep
the 3x3?
Yeah, and one of the squares is empty, so you have to keep sliding blocks. It was like you have to form a picture of Marty performing.
Wow.
At the prom, you have to perform that. You have to like finish that picture, and I'm like, what is happening here? What are these games? Why can nobody get these right? Thankfully, the most interesting of the batch of these older ones, Super Back to the Future Part 2. On Super Famicom only. So raises a couple questions. Why would they make a Back to the Future game that never came out in America? Right? Like, that just feels like they left money on the wall. And then, where's Super Back to the Future War 3? Like, who just says, like, yeah, you know what? Let's make Super Godfather 2. Like, you know, you gotta, like, at least start with the first game. I'm pretty sure there is... I know this actually, a Super Nintendo Super Star Wars line, and that one starts with the first game before moving on. So, Super Back to the Future Part 2 gives everything that chibi look, so maybe that's why it didn't come to America, you know, they were like, oh, we can't have that.
Too cute.
But no, it actually looks great, Sean, I really liked it, the aesthetic, and
but like, you like those things.
Yeah, I'm a weeb. And it's a platforming game with Marty on a hoverboard. He's on the hoverboard the whole time, and you kind of like use the hoverboard to attack enemies. And it's still a platforming game, but the platforming and it is level to level. It's much kinder than this game. There is a clear objective of get to the end of the stage, and while it's still no explanation for why like robots are fighting you or Koopas are fighting. There's no reason for why these things happen in either game. I just look on it more favorably in Super Back to the Future Part 2 versus Back to the Future Part 2 and 3. And I'll tell you one thing we're not going to look at favorably because I just know it from the way this episode's been going, and that is Back to the Future Part 2 and 3's Essential Games List vote. Is that legal?
The way you said it?
The way I said it? Can I say that?
I don't think it's legal. You said it very strange.
Because I had to add vote at the end.
Yeah, you kind of botched this.
Yeah. Maybe
Let's
I should
start the episode over.
Yeah, no, maybe I should just go back to the past to arrive at the future.
A tree.
I know they have to go back to the future, but they do go to the past. It took me a little bit as a kid to work that out.
Well, in the first movie, they're trying to get Back to the Future. But then, like, after that, it's
Then
we're
they have to
going all
go
over the
back
place.
to the future. In the second one, they have to go back to the future.
I mean, I guess
But that's
never
like
been
forward,
there.
though.
But yeah. Well, Marty's never been there, so yeah, that's not
right. But Doc is going back to the future.
Yeah, that's true. Also, Back to the Future Part 2. This is not Essential Games List vote. Who are we kidding? I botched it so bad I'm going to try it again. But Back to the Future Part 2 also tried to predict a lot of things about the future. Predict also that, like, you know, all of our bosses would be Japanese, or we'd be run by Japanese companies. But then there's that he gets fired via fax, and it's like, you guys really thought fax would still be around? And it's like 7 fax machines in the house
still
go off.
telefiring, which is a thing that happens. So
True.
Yeah, it's like
Close
the Zoom equivalent.
yeah.
Yeah, like the idea of like the future of fax machines would just be like, well, they'll be everywhere. Not like we'll have moved on. It'd be like, no, we'll be able to have more fax machines. They'll be in every wall of the house.
Right. Like just how they had one TV in 1955. Now it's like it's like we have 7 fax
A
machines.
wall.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you know, fuck.
You're not just allowed to curse
movie
for no reason on the show.
You know that movie that we just played, the
Total Recall?
Total Recall. It's kind of in the same
Wow,
way.
how ironic that you couldn't recall.
Ha ha ha! It's kind of like how there would be these video phones that you have to like stare straight into, and if Arnold Schwarzenegger is talking to somebody on the video call phone, they will be perfectly framed, but he's obviously just kind of staring at it from a weird angle and is almost definitely not in the screen.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
Yeah. Well, the technology I'm waiting for is like when you throw your back out, I just want like a thing that carries you around upside down so people can't tell you're not Crispin Glover.
That's funny.
Does anyone know about that? Can I drop this fun fact?
You can bring it up. I did read about it, but go for it.
Okay. The Crispin Glover, who plays the father in the first movie, there was some discrepancy. I probably
was
get
a
it wrong.
pay
It was
dispute.
something where, yeah, like they weren't going to give him the pay that he was in his contract or something. So they just replaced him, and so people couldn't tell it was a different actor. They just made him upside down the whole movie by saying he threw out his back, and in the future you hang upside down all day when you have a bad back. So like that actor, I didn't know when I was a kid that was not the same actor because it worked. And when he's upside down, it's like the Mona Lisa upside down thing. Like you can't tell. You can't recognize the face when you're upside down. So I thought that was hilarious.
I've never heard of this Mona Lisa upside down thing.
You've never seen like the picture of Mona Lisa upside down and you're like, what's wrong with this picture? And you're like, it looks perfect to me. And you turn it right side up and her eyes are all like screwed up.
Oh, I get it.
Have you ever seen that?
Now I'm understanding it.
And I just want to make it clear that the pay dispute thing stems back to 1992, which was only 2 years after the release of the movie, so probably the more likely story. But Crispin Glover did change his response in 2013, stating that he decided not to do part 2 over a philosophical disagreement on the film's message.
Interesting. I don't appreciate you implying that time travel is possible.
He felt the story rewarded the characters with financial gain rather than love.
Well, like the bad guy, right? Like,
well, I guess Marty was also trying to do it, but
yeah, but that was like wrong. He realized that was a mistake.
Yeah, but I just think it's funny that this guy's trying to say that, you know, he didn't want to take a pile of money to make
go
this film
find
because he had a
Crispin,
philosophical
Joe. Stop
disagreement.
arguing against Mike.
Yeah. No, I'm sure Crispin Glover loves part 3.
He loves this episode.
Yeah, he loves this episode, and I love the Essential Games list. I love the Essential Games list. I just said it 2 seconds ago. But
Play the song again.
No. But I hate this game. I really think this is one of the worst we've played yet, and it's maybe just because it's so large. Like, if it was just these little collecting mini games and then a series of like, okay, you just got the fax machine, and then here's 3 locations, which one are you going to put it in, and you just guess right or wrong, I would actually review that game more favorably than this empty, barren wasteland of a game that really frustrated me because I just kept trying to find the game within it and not the stupid Super Mario Brothers clone of stomping on enemies that barely fight back. There are enemies that know how to come at you, sure, and those ones you're better off just getting out of the way, but nobody in this wasteland is really like a challenging encounter or, really the most disappointing thing. None of them, there's no boss fights, there's no other video game tropes here, so the whole Super Mario Brothers thing is just odd. It just felt like, oh, this is popular, so we can do it too. It's like, no, man, there's a reason why, you can't just copy someone else's homework. You have to do your homework. Sheesh. Bad game. What about you, Sean?
So going back to Total Recall, I had one of my main complaints was that they skipped most of the movie. Now, outside of skipping most of the movie, they did put a lot of the movie in there. And now this is going a step further in Back to the Future Part 2 and 3, where they took the branding and some of the imagery from the movies and just said, like, that's close enough. And I don't think that works. I think that they needed to figure out a different way to brand this game. Maybe I wouldn't have hated it if it had something to do with something else. I still would have had a huge problem with how repetitive the actual moment-to-moment gameplay is, and how just how long they make those repetitive things go on for. But I think that branding this as Back to the Future, yeah, it's got some time travel stuff, but it's just not for me. It's not for me. Not essential.
Joe.
So there's two icons of Back to the Future. One is Marty McFly, and he's got his 80s look and he's the cool guy. The other icon is Doc. Doc has not been in it. We've had 3 adaptations, if you count this as 2, of each movie, and there's been no hint of Doc. What is this? How is this possible?
Maybe he wouldn't release his likeness.
There's a cutscene at the end of this, which is actually a very good cutscene of the whole train thing. It's like right out of the movie. It's like the only thing in this that is right out of the movie, and there's still no hint of Doc. It's just like when the lightning hits and like time travel's about to happen, it just goes back to the menu screen, and then you see the DeLorean and like on the menu screen. And I was even like looking. I'm like, please tell me there's like Doc is in there. Like you can see him in this as a sprite on the menu screen or something. He's not in there. That is just one of the many crazy oversights that they had on this game. Everything else I've already kind of gone over and you guys covered in your votes. I just had to have some justice for Doc there as I vote this game not essential.
I would even say Doc is better as you get older. Like, I think Doc is actually the star of the whole trilogy.
Even when I was younger, Doc was my favorite. I always liked the wily scientist.
I don't really... I think there's something a little sketch about him. He's got himself like involved.
His 15-year-old best friend.
Yeah, he's got a 15-year-old best friend. He's got involved with some Haitian terrorists. I don't know how into Doc I am.
Interesting.
They were Libyan.
That's what I think.
Yeah. I think it's just worth mentioning that we're going to continue to see film video game adaptations here, and I think we're just gonna have to try to be a little more balanced in the future about how much of the episode is about the movie versus
this is
the
your
game.
fault, Mike.
I know. I just think I liked both these movies, right? Back to the Future Part 2 and 3, and I like Total Recall. So maybe we just have to wait till I watch a bad movie. But when's that gonna happen? I don't know. They're taking the hits. The next movie video game is Little Nemo the Dream Master, and I freaking love that movie too.
Well, I've never seen it, so I'll let you do the talking there.
Maybe I'll give it a watch.